as we've been really saying, not just since the start of January, but really going into December, this will be the year in which the Brexiteers try every which way they possibly can to try and prove that Brexit is some sort of success. And we are already seeing this. I quoted, well, not quoted, but a good example was a quote, an alternative news source for the UK, Foxhole News, and trust me, it is anything but actual, shall we say, newsworthy. Indeed, yesterday it was singing the praises of that Britain got a trade deal with Ghana. Britain already had a trade deal with Ghana when it was in the EU. But again, it does nothing to our GDP because, as we have constantly said, doesn't matter that if we go and get all these trade deals halfway around the world, doesn't matter if we join the TTP, it's not on our doorstep. Trade flows are very, very observable. They do not change. And our closest, and again, we've discussed this before, trade gravity is a thing. It is a concept, and it is a proven concept that countries always trade with their closest neighbours. Why? Because it is easier to trade with someone next door to you than it is halfway around the world, which is apparently what we are trying to do. Again, this does not benefit the UK. This is, and again, an attempt by the Tories and their magical ideology thinking that somehow it's the EU that's been holding us back, and only if we could join and do trade deals with all these other countries, somehow things will be magically better. But we are also seeing bizarre things, as we are going to get into now. And this in particular, we're going to be talking about the vaccine rollout plan, because a lot of Brexiteers have been trumpeting this as some sort of Brexit bonus. And no, you're absolutely kidding yourself. So before we jump into that, please do remember to hit that like and share button. Also down below there is a link to my Patreon page and a What If Donation link. And thank you very much to the people who do support me that way. So, this comes from The Guardian, and the title is, "Yes, Britain's vaccine rollout is a triumph, but let's not kid ourselves, it proves the Brexit case." Europeans are circling the wagons around the beleaguered EU President Ursula von der Leyen, amid the wreckage of her European Health Union and unilaterally short-lived suspension of the Northern Ireland Protocol. The desire for a pan-European approach to vaccine procurement and distribution was in essence right, say German and French leaders. COVID knows no borders, and Europe must fight it as a whole. Nor were the delivery failures of her making, and on Northern Ireland she could hardly be reserved for her self-acknowledgement and bad decision-making more quickly, and rally to the EU President. And defenders of her and the Commission, the defenders of her and the Commission are wrong. Both the dilatory procurement and the risk-adverse delivery strategy were self-made disasters, originating in a centralised federal mindset that does not work. Europe can only emerge stronger, beating back mounting criticism among the continent over vaccine shortages, if they really look at the failures in the eye and radically reorientates itself. At the same time, Boris Johnson's government is winning pundits. Under immense pressure, it rolled the dice, seized an excessive vaccine contract with AstraZeneca by paying hundreds of millions up front before regulatory approval to allow the building of UK vaccine procurement capacity. He has reaped the rewards of this, and similarly, generalist contracts were struck with other suppliers. The hope was enough, that the vaccine would work to justify the spending. So it proved, and on top of a well-prepared NHS has rolled out the vaccinations with stunning efficiency. The, quote, freedom of Brexit is justified and churning up delighted Brexiteers. Again, wrong. Brexit remains a self-inflicted disaster, growing worse by the day. Witness the mounting chaos in our ports and the suffocation of exporters and the service sector alike through their exclusion from the single market and customs union. Exports to the EU are down an extraordinary 68% in January. As for freedom, Britain always had the right to opt out of the EU regulatory directives. The NHS, with its foundational socialist commitment to equal health for all, would have worked well in any circumstances. But the Tories are the English Nationalist Party now. They can only be no other. Johnson and Rishi Sunak may say that they want the alchemy, or may want the alchemy of a projective, agile government working hard with innovative companies, a classic European social market approach across the board. But in reality, they blunder on with reheated Thatcherism at the core of the reflex policies. Only last week, bids for 10 new free ports in England closed, and they insist that the escalating Brexit-induced crisis in businesses and the city are just teething problems. Nationalist hyper-Thatcherites are never going to implement the aggressive social market capitalist policies needed to build back better, or strike the deals involving compromises over sovereignty, vital for future prosperity. Mainland Europeans should also heed the lessons. AstraZeneca, as part of its deal with Oxford University, aims to produce 2 billion doses of its vaccine for Europe, the US and the world at $3 a jab, less than a cup of coffee, and far cheaper than its more venial rivals. It is a social market stakeholder capitalism success story, as has been the UK government's public-private vaccination policy. However, vaccines are not procured like widgets, and yields can be disappointment. The reason for being unable to supply with the EU with 100 million jabs by the end of March, but soon US regulators will give it the green light too. AstraZeneca did not deserve President Macron giving score to the army of anti-vaxxers, particularly in France, by falsely saying that the vaccine did not work for the over 65s, even as he concluded that Ursula von der Leyen in trying to bully the British into surrendering their contract supplies to the EU. Nor should Angela Merkel timidly rally behind her ex-colleague von der Leyen. Her finance minister Olaf Scholz was more on the money when he said that neither Germany nor Europe could afford to let this shift repeat itself. And amen to that. The Commission should never have aggregated vaccine procurement and distributed to itself as if it were a Soviet planner. It had neither the expertise nor the experience, and it should have stuck firmly to a tried and tested social market approach, deregulating the response to member states, while ensuring that there was no bidding war with a robust system for inter-EU vaccine sharing. It should have been devised by an EU-wide approach to contrast the anti-vaxxers who have been abjuring the vaccine nationalism to the last. Never blockading Northern Ireland, nevertheless, its proposition that no European is safe until every European is safe is completely right, and it must stand by it. However, instead of the luxuriating in a freedom that, when it works, is thoroughly European, Britain should be thinking of how to find its way back to the European mainstream and make those values live in Europe as much as in Britain. Future economic and business success does not lie in joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which accounts for some 8% of our trade, or in free ports, which are havens for business malpractice and deregulation. There are no compensation for what we are losing as a European supply chains with collapsing along with open access to European markets, hitting industries varied as the music and fishing. The City of London, the tax cow for the nation, desperately needs deep and binding financial services ties to EU treaties if it is to prosper, not the minimalist of a scant and rickety temporary deal, which anyway the government seems reluctant to try and negotiate. If only von der Leyen had trusted Europe to be its social market self, with a proper balance between the spread inequality, with the Commission as a steward and referee. The EU would now be awash with vaccines. Equally, whether a success Britain had in the future, it will be because it too is finding its way to be European. Brexit's destiny is to be the trigger for that realisation in both Britain and the continent. The first step for Britain will be a return to the single market and customs union, and because it cannot be a rule taker, it must and will eventually rejoin the EU. An EU that has learned some lessons. It may take a decade, but it will happen because it must. Warts and all, we will stand together as Europeans. And I completely agree with that end statement. We will sooner or later have to rejoin the EU. These are not teething problems. And yes, the EU, as we have said multiple times before, the EU by no means is a perfect system. Yes, it does have some flaws. What you saw with the vaccine rollout was clearly a flaw in the EU, but at least they seem to be learning from that flaw compared to our own government, who will not learn any of these flaws. And yes, the whole Boris taking the risk and buying these vaccines at well above the market price was an incredible gamble. Luckily, it paid off. Remember, if these vaccines had not proven to be effective, this would be a complete and utter national scandal. So let's not forget the dice rolling Boris did. And by no means should we be giving Boris ultimate credit for what is essentially a tried, test and true practice of the NHS, something which Boris Johnson wants to try and dismantle to make it into a private practice. We again are going to have to fight long and hard and huge battles that we never had to fight before because we were in the EU. Just as we had to raise the flag on workers' rights potentially being looked at to be taken away, we are going to have to fight all sorts of new battles to try and defend hard-won freedoms that we have taken for granted for so long. So, with that said, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And also down below there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link. And thank you very much to the people who do support my channel that way. And as always, we'll see you all next time.